StarFish is a product design consulting services company. Companies come to us that have a technology and they'd like to have a successful product or a successful product company. And we work with them to help them figure out what they need and help them as efficiently as we can become a successful company doing that. We've been doing that for 25 years. High consequence, very, very real stuff that going to have a big impact in the world. That's what we'd like to work on. For Parkinson's therapy is a big one that we have going on. We now have about 250 people-ish and 3 offices. So we're based in Toronto, Victoria, and California.
Great. So a quick intro to one of my old friends, a business mentor of over 10 years, Scott Phillips from StarFish Medical. Thanks for coming on.
Great. Nice to be here, Kale.
One of the things I didn't know about you, but is where you actually grew up and how you made it to Vancouver Island.
Great. Well, I grew up in Tsawwassen, small town, one of the suburbs of Vancouver, where my father was a doctor. So it was a great place to grow up. Studied engineering physics at University of British Columbia. Graduated in the late 80s. Had some jobs, traveled the world, lived in Calgary for a while where my girlfriend was studying medicine. She got a residency to Victoria. That was the actual proximal cause. That was in 1996. So I was a few years into my career by then. Came here and we loved it, put down roots, started having babies, and we're still here 26 years later, or whatever it is, 29 years later.
Yeah, that sounds great. So moved to Vancouver Island for love, basically.
That's right, just for love.
Oh, that's great. My father was at UBC in the 70s, so just before you, and lots of great people from UBC end up on Vancouver Island, so it's a good school. Tell me one of the things or some of the things you like to do on Vancouver Island outside of work.
Well, I met my wife in a mountaineering club, the Varsity Outdoors Club at UBC, and we were very active in that club for a few years. So we wanted to still access outdoors things, but on the island it's harder to get to the mountains here than it is in Vancouver. So we got into more kayaking and canoeing, and I got into cycling, and so actually road cycling, which is, but there's a lot of sort of rural roads through the trees and so on in Victoria, so I really enjoy all that.
Probably in the time you've been here, you've probably seen cycling like really, really grow. There's cycling businesses, there's founders of companies here. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's very true. Certainly, there are a lot of cycling clubs, that's for sure, and so there's. No matter what you like to do on a bike, there's other people who like that too, and it's easy to find them.
And in the heart of winter, we're cycling every day to and from work.
I rode to work this morning. My fingers got cold.
And my toes. That's amazing. Now I want to pivot a little bit and go to StarFish. How long did it take you to grow to its current size, and can you give us a snapshot of what StarFish does and how you impact the business world?
Yeah, okay. So StarFish is a product design consulting services company. So companies come to us that have a technology and they'd like to have a successful product or a successful product company. And we work with them to help them figure out what they need and help them as efficiently as we can become a successful company doing that. We've been doing that for 25 years. So we're kind of technology driven, like we're mostly engineers. But of course, you end up with a bit of everything. End up with some regulatory people and quality people and intellectual property and accountants and manufacturing people and so on. So they end up with a fairly broad base of different kinds of people.
And what's really exciting and happening for your company or your industry right now?
Well, there's excitement of different varieties. So there's some broad trends. Any sort of change in the industry is good if you're in the design services side of the world. So there's affordability problems in healthcare, so that drives people finding efficiencies. There's getting people out of ICUs or avoiding operating rooms, minimally invasive. There's AI integration for better diagnostics. There's better imaging technology. There's better catheters. There's so many things that are happening in the broad scheme. So, and we're involved in all of those things. We now have about 250 people-ish across the enterprise. That includes a couple of sub-companies. And 3 offices. So we're based in Toronto, Victoria, and California. So just the California was an acquisition less than 3 months ago. So we're still figuring out how to do the integration and so on. And then there's all the excitement of the actual projects, like lasers that do eye surgery, or big antennas that push microwaves into your body that generate ultrasound waves that you can measure things inside your liver. That would be an example. Or systems to inject drugs inside your brain with a needle to a very particular spot. For Parkinson's therapy is a big one that we have going on. So high consequence, very, very real stuff that going to have a big impact in the world. That's what we'd like to work on.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I know that SFU, where I graduated from, they've had some recent advancements related to Parkinson's as well. So
Right.
that's great.
That's right.
I don't
We
know if
work
it's related to that project, but
No, nothing. This
yeah.
particular park is for a multinational corporation, this particular one. It's one of those standard, you start with a client in California, they get acquired by a company, and they in turn get acquired by another company, and so we've been working our way through.
How much of your business is now East Coast and US based? Is what is kind of the client mix?
So British Columbia is now around 2% of our revenues. So it's which is, I think, one of the interesting themes of the business as it's developed, deciding the sort of geography where to focus. So we're North America based, roughly 80% US revenues, roughly, depending on the year. Sometimes 65%, sometimes 90%. Kind of depends on the circumstance.
Wow. And a lot of that US growth was done not remotely, but was done primarily with that West Coast and Toronto focused, and now you're really expanding.
That's correct. Well, part of the Toronto acquisition was 7 years ago, which was 18 years into the company or so.
Okay.
So the rationale at the time was just better access to the Eastern market, because that's a big market, particularly in the U.S. and around Boston area, also Minnesota, New Jersey, Florida. There's business all over the place down there. We thought we'd be more credible if people could come to see us more easily. So
You just mentioned an acquisition. What are kind of like one of the challenges or a couple of the challenges that you guys have faced in acquiring these new companies or expanding to these new markets?
Well, there's challenges of all varieties. Our rationale for California was really just for customer intimacy. We just wanted to be close by. We already had a number of clients in Southern California, so it's generally a good market for us. Now, it took us a while to actually find the right target company. Companies in our industry are kind of built around different philosophies, right? It's kind of one of the truisms that in our industry, companies like us get acquired by private equity or larger manufacturing type companies. And usually they are not successful. Their premise fails. Their premise of making the company more reliable squeezes out the innovative gene out of the company. And then it kind of loses its heart. So it's so that's an interesting premise to go into that type of acquisition with. How do you make sure you hold on to the heart and amplify that? So each of the ones that we've done has had different challenges, and we're just working our way through the California one. But so far, we're delighted with the sort of philosophical alignment around what are we really all about, and what do we consider to be value for the clients, and so on.
Did it take a lot of time finding that kind of alignment once you had them as a prospect, or how long was kind of the process?
I actually went to California and talked to the owner. In this case, was an elderly owner, been running the company for 40 years, nice, with a very particular angle. And in this case, luckily, he'd actually written up a thing. He called it the tribal lore document. But it's the kind of the corporate philosophy, I guess. A small company, under 30 employees. Then I got to watch some of their cultural kind of rituals, I guess you might say, or what are the normal things they do in their company, and have a sense of it. And got to really sense this sort of reverence for creativity and breakthroughs on problems, and leaning into hard technical things, and very customer centric in their view of how to do business. So those were very reassuring to have that. And then the founder himself was somebody who really delighted in new and exciting things. So that was a good fit for us.
Oh, cool. Yeah, just amazing story to grow, well over 90% of your revenue off the island. I've always said you need to be able to do a little bit of business off the island at least to be successful, to have a business on Vancouver Island, whether you bring customers here or you go get them. But that's a huge undertaking to grow to
I
the
consider
size.
that to be like the sandbox problem. That depending on how, so you got this fun polarity to navigate as an entrepreneur. The more specialized you're offering, the farther afield you have to look.
Yeah.
And so do you get more specialized and look further afield, or less specialized and be more local? And so in my case, very early on, like 2003 maybe, we decided to rebrand. The old company had the exciting name of Scott Phillips Engineering, and I still have the sign. In fact, I'll show you the sign just a moment.
Sure.
Here we go. This is the sign. This was the sign that was on the door of the original office in Esquimalt. But at a certain point, that became a disadvantage to have a company named after yourself. It could kind of make it look like you're pretending to be a company. And and also our mandate was any sort of engineering. Then it became any sort of product development. And then we argued about what type of product development. Should we narrow it farther? And eventually we said, well, medical is a field we've had some success in. And we like the characteristics of the market. So let's just do that. But we better go looking for business far away. And so that was actually really, really hard to figure out how to sell far away. And but it was necessary, strategically necessary, to sacrifice in the hope of becoming more successful that way. Which meant we had to go into markets where there was competitors that were well established and go win business in their backyard from far away. Which is pretty darn hard.
What worked back then that is still working now to go win business from far away?
I think, we're a services company. Mm-hmm. And I think ultimately when you sell complex services, it's essentially a consultative sale.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to give people insight into their own problem they've been wrestling with for 10 years or whatever amount of time, and tell them something about themselves they don't know. And so it's that's a fairly high bar, right? Be able to give them some insight as to what they should do, and then make them feel like that they're kind of at risk unless they come talk to you. They might make bad decisions. And and that may be the highest value consulting work you do for them, is the work you do for free to win them as clients.
Interesting. So really consult with them, help them, and then they'll choose you.
That helps too. Well, at the same time, you're kind of shaping an opportunity that you can do.
Yeah.
Just bear in mind, if I'm out there selling and pitching a vision, it's not going to be me doing the work, right? So I have to actually shape it to be a project that our team can do.
Great. And what is maybe a new tool that's helping you do that these days?
It's interesting in terms of actual software tools and so on. I'm a kind of a note taker. As I talk to people, I tend to write things or type things. And what I found actually moving all that online, so we shifted to a Teams environment, and like Microsoft Teams. And then I discovered the OneNote as an online tool through Teams. So now I hardly write anything in Word anymore, or it's almost everything I write is in Teams. And if it's not in Teams, it's on Obsidian, which is kind of my sort of hyperlink note-taking tool that I use for my personal journaling. So between those are the tools that I use to process my thoughts and to have access and to all the things that I'm working on. But I no longer do this selling to our clients, that's a whole other journey, as you could imagine. It's only the most strategic clients that I would be developing sort of a deeper relationship with and sort of a rapport.
Yeah.
But in terms of pitching our services and so on, I don't have like standard slide decks that I go through. That's done by the sales team.
That's a good thing, I think. What do you think the future holds in the next, 12, 18, 3 years, 18 months or 3 years? Where do you think your industry is heading?
Oh yeah, that's quite yeah. So medical, there's been about a 2-year hangover from COVID, actually, I believe, or maybe
Okay.
it was related to the high interest rate. But the venture capital market kind of got quite unfriendly or quite difficult. So a lot of companies got early financing in the sort of 2021, 22 range. Then they struggled in 23 and 24. And so
Okay.
that became our client base, right? That we're having trouble getting capital to hire us to fulfill their dreams. So the whole industry has struggled through some of that. And you've also seen companies like Medtronic go through multiple rounds of layoff. Bayer gone through multiple rounds of layoffs. But we see on the horizon that things are warming up. As the interest rates have come down, people feel more confident to make investments. So that's one of the big things. We just see that the sun is kind of on the horizon. Looks like it's going to start coming up. So we're feeling kind of optimistic that way. Then you got all the weirdness of Trump and, for example, the regulator in the U.S. The U.S. is one of the big markets for medical technology and medical technology startups, certainly our
Yeah.
big market. If there's regulatory uncertainty, which is signaled through who do you put in charge of the agencies, then people kind of sit on their hands and wait to see how that's going to fall out. Are there certain segments going to be favored over others? Are they going to be processing things faster or slower or less predictably? Nobody knows right now. So that's a little fly in the ointment. Then all the other just general trends about medical technology, more miniaturization, more AI, more robotic surgery, and that sort of thing. So more remote patient monitoring, more image-guided therapies. Things are changing. Broadly, it's going to be okay. We just have to navigate it cleverly and wisely.
Yeah. No, it's such a huge field. It's great to kind of give us the insight on it. Now, I'll switch a little bit to doing business here on Vancouver Island. In your opinion, what's the most important thing that someone needs to know to be successful as a business owner on Vancouver Island?
That's so it's there's lots of successful businesses. I mean, I wouldn't be very expert at what it takes to be running a restaurant in Vancouver Island or running a tourism-oriented business on Vancouver Island. I'd be more expert on being on Vancouver Island, selling in other places. But maybe I'll address my thoughts about that.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits we have on the island is that people come here. People from with all sorts of histories, experience, and so on. They arrive in Victoria. They are looking for an opportunity to move to Victoria in some cases, and so it's possible to hire quite specialized people. Which, if you imagine you're running a business in Red Deer or Moose Jaw, how would you attract the people that you really needed? Even Winnipeg has got problems like that. So it's possible to attract amazing people, but you have to see it as a strategic capacity you need to actually be aspirational, go find the right people and convince them to move here. So that's one of the things but also that you can build an amazing business here that sells all over the world. And there are plenty of examples, and maybe later on, if you ask me about that, I'll talk about some of the other interesting success stories in the history of the island here on the technology and medical front. So that would be the number one thing.
Yeah. It's funny. Just this morning, I checked into a LinkedIn Victoria jobs group that I manage, and 250 people from across Canada wanted to move here, right? So I had to admit them all to this group, and yeah, it's amazing some of the talent you see. People who are data scientists, people who are directors of companies. There's such a big mix. Some people want to come early in their career, some people later in their career. So yeah, it is a kind of a magnet, right? Whether it's to come for the weather or the lifestyle or just proximity to some great cities.
Yeah, we hired a guy maybe 3-4 years ago that he had been the head of development for a diagnostic instrument company in Ottawa. And so we assumed that we'd be trying to convince him to move to Toronto. But it turns out he wanted to move to Victoria. So now we have a top-notch R&D leader in the biotech sector that's based out of our Victoria office. So.
Interesting, yeah. You think sometimes it's good to have that proximity with the Toronto office, but they say, "Oh nope, I'm going to skip over." That's good.
It's good to give people options. There's 10 times more people to hire in Toronto than there are in Victoria, so yeah, there's benefits there.
Yeah, that's great. Now I saw our population had just in Canada had gone over 41 million, and
okay, sure.
in California's
500,000 immigrants per year, then that's going to have an accelerating factor on that.
Yeah, and then California is 39 million, right? So you've got almost doubling your availability of talent. It gets expensive in California, but you've got your fingers in a lot of pies.
There's reasons and there's challenges no matter what you do.
Yeah. Let's dive in. You mentioned kind of other businesses you really like or respect. Is there anything that comes to mind that maybe a business that our audience would not have heard of recently, or one that's done?
Look to some of the pioneers in Victoria or Vancouver Island business on the technology front. One of the really interesting groups is a group called the Axis Group. That there was, I think, 5 or 6 of them. They were all PhD chemists, and they. Back when the Navy had its research center in Victoria, that was kind of a founding market for a lot of technology companies. So these guys were doing assay technologies, trying to figure out how to measure different contaminants. And then they realized they needed very precise acids to be able to do their environmental assays so they built an environmental assay company called Axis Analytical. But then they thought, well, maybe we should go into acids also. So they started making acids, and most people don't know that company they called it C-Star Chemicals, I think. And they actually built up the world's leading manufacturer of specialized, super precise, super clean, like parts per billion type contaminations right here in Victoria or in Saanich. And they were shipping all over the world. They had offices in Europe, and in fact, they're one of 2 main companies in the world doing that. And they just kept going. They created a company making ocean-based buoys for measuring things. It's called Axis Technologies. And so over time, they just kept building things. So that I had great admiration for those guys. It was kind of a wasteland of technology innovation on the island at the time. They're all kind of in their late 70s now, and mostly retired. But they've created a foundation that all those people have worked in those companies, gone off to build other things. Daniels is another old time company, originally building radios for fishermen. The company, I believe, is around 100 years old now, and eventually navigated into radio repeaters to go on tops of mountains and emergency response type radio systems. That company was sold a few years back, but it's continues to operate in Victoria after all this time. And now they're part of a much larger group, part of an Australian public company. Power Measurement, maybe people wouldn't have heard of that. That was a company that spun out of BC Hydro, I think. So measuring electrical currents but making special meters that were all interconnected that they would sell for industrial uses. So a pretty specialized use was really built up. They hired a young co-op student, a guy named Brad Forth, and he built it up and ultimately sold it for a lot of money to a French multinational called Schneider. Wow. And to this day, they operate a big plant in Saanich, do a lot of R&D and sort of part of a global group now. Maybe the last company I'll mention is a company called Redland, which that it's in Saanich also, right by the gravel pit there on Sean Heights. And so there's a guy named Bob Redden, and he had some ideas of how to grow crystals. And but very, very specialized crystals, which if you think about the whole semiconductor industry, it's basically growing crystals, right? But his crystals he wanted to grow were called PZT. So he actually figured out how you could actually take the raw zinc, tellurium, I forget what the P is, start with the raw materials and actually make his own alloys, and then invent special technology over the course of a month, grow these single crystal, gigantic things like 4 inches in diameter and a foot long. Turns out those are the best way to detect X-rays. And they actually built an X-ray detecting company. And so imagine building a semiconductor fab in Victoria is a massive undertaking. It's super complex and a giant undertaking. Ultimately, they over 30 years later, they sold it to Canon, and it's now kind of the center of Canon's next generation sensor technology for the whole world. That will revolutionize how CT imaging works. And so those are maybe some interesting examples of companies that arose that then inspired all the proliferation now that you see of technology companies on the island. Really came from those roots.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I've known some of the past employees of these companies. Head of sales for Danielson, and I've seen it on people's resumes and in their work experience, and it's interesting. People sometimes think of Vancouver Island as tourism and then government down south and retirement, but world-class manufacturers that were and are pioneering technologies is a different kind of important story that I appreciate you bring to our listeners. So
yeah, absolutely. So it's very possible to build something amazing here, or to be adjacent to those guys, because if they're going to attract hundreds of millions of dollars to do things, they're going to need people to do it, right? They're not going to do it all in-house. They're going to need machinists, and they're going to need plastics, and they're going to need event management services, and they're going to need accounting, and they need all the other things that companies need around them.
Yeah. There's some of them grow to be behemoths, but they'll also have 10, 15, 20 businesses that support them. Kind of on that vein, what's another Vancouver Island business you would recommend to our audience, and why? And it could be on the recreational or B2B side. I mean, whatever comes to mind that you like that our audience might not know about, that they might want to do business with in the future.
The audience might not know about. That's interesting. I kind of like all the cool restaurants that are just in Victoria. That I think we're very blessed. One of the benefits of having a tourist industry here is that you get so many restaurants, and so I love all the fun little restaurants that pop up. Some people with a big dream and a big vision, and like name one, like Brasserie L'École, for example. It's a very specialized French restaurant. It's in an old Chinese building. It's a very unique Victoria kind of spot where people just go to hang out. And so if you haven't been there, go check them out.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so many people from all over the world who bring their cuisine here and then share it, right? And from Chinatown to I was in a Colombian restaurant recently and stuff.
Really interesting.
So it's great that we've got that. It's another thing to help attract talent here as well. As we're coming for both the environment and the jobs, but also the food as well. So when people come to visit us, they're coming from bigger cities, typically in the U.S. So it's having the backdrop of a sophisticated city here makes them feel like that they're not too far away from home somehow. So that's great. Where can listeners find you if they want to connect?
They can find me online. Just you can imagine that I have limited capacity to take meetings and so on. I'm on LinkedIn, but we also have a ton of content. They want to listen to some more insights. If they go to our website, starfishmedical.com, then there's dozens of more specific technical things on there. In fact, I think our website's about 1,000 pages. So, but if you want to watch me interview people, for example, just go to starfishmedical.com. I believe it's /webinars, and that will take you. Otherwise, the website's new, so I can't guarantee where it is, but you find it without too much trouble.
That's great. Yeah, and I'd recommend to everybody, one of the soft approaches to approach business owners and stuff is just to follow them on LinkedIn. That's kind of like, and it's a good soft introduction to people. And I definitely don't encourage people to send a message with an ask ever right off the bat. So yeah, and definitely get into people's website, especially when they've invested so much, 1,000 pages plus webinars. So you've got lots of different media. Tell us just a little bit more about the webinar series.
Oh, sure. So we run conferences for our industry. It's just kind of a way to help inspire entrepreneurs. It's called Medical Device Playbook. And if you go to meddevplaybook.com, you'll see some of that on there. And then we have a variety of, trying to create authentic content that's useful. We have many authors in our company. That's a whole other webinar worth of discussion about that. I try to run every quarter, maybe every month, some years, interviews with people that are inspiring in different ways and try to learn from them.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for doing that, Scott. And I'll make sure to pick up on that a little bit more than I have. So. And also thank you for sharing your journey to Vancouver Island and about your business and also how you give back to the community through Viatech, through the Entrepreneurs Organization, through the cycling community as well. I think I've seen you do some fundraisers, Tour de Rock and stuff like that. So
yeah. You bet. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Really
Kale.
appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Talk to you later.